The sound of metal scraping against wood pierced the quiet night as Owen Newcomb pushed open the door to his barn, lantern held high. The flame flickered, casting long shadows across the hay-strewn floor. It had been a grueling day on his ranch outside Amarillo, Texas, and all he wanted was to check on his prized mare before turning in for the night. But the muffled gasp from the corner of the barn told him he wasn't alone. "Who's there?" Owen called out, raising the lantern higher. His free hand instinctively moved to the holster at his hip. "Show yourself." For a moment, nothing moved. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from behind a stack of hay bales. A woman, dirty, disheveled, but undeniably beautiful even in her current state, stood before him, her dark eyes wide with fear. Her dress was torn at the hem, caked with dust from the trail, and her hair hung in tangled waves around her shoulders. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I mean no harm. I just needed somewhere to rest." Owen studied her carefully, noting the bruise blooming on her cheekbone and the way she cradled her left arm against her body. This wasn't some vagrant looking for a free meal. This woman was running from something or someone. "You're running from something," he said, lowering his gun but keeping his gaze steady. "Let me help." The woman's posture stiffened. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity," Owen replied, hanging the lantern on a nearby hook. "It's common decency. My name is Owen Newcomb, and this is my ranch." "And you are," she hesitated, glancing toward the door as if calculating her chances of escape. Finally, she spoke. "Victoria Thornton." "Well, Miss Thornton, you look like you could use a hot meal and a safe place to sleep. I've got both." Victoria's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "And what would you want in return, Mr. Newcomb?" Owen shook his head, understanding her wariness all too well. It was 1878, and a woman alone had plenty of reason to be cautious. "Nothing but the truth when you're ready to give it. Until then, you're welcome to stay in my guest room. The house is just up the hill." Victoria's eyes darted between Owen and the barn door, clearly weighing her options. Whatever or whoever she was running from must have been worse than the uncertainty of accepting a stranger's help. "Just for tonight," she finally conceded, though her body remained tense. Owen nodded. "Just for tonight, then." The walk to the main house was silent, save for the sound of their boots crunching on the gravel path and the distant howl of a coyote. Owen's ranch house wasn't grand, a sturdy two-story structure built with his own hands after returning from the war, but it was clean and warm. "The kitchen's this way," Owen said, leading her through the front door. "When did you last eat?" Victoria's stomach answered for her with an audible growl. A flush crept up her neck. "Yesterday morning, I think." Owen lit the stove and pulled out a pot. "I've got some stew left from dinner. Not much, but it'll fill your belly until morning." As he reheated the meal, Owen tried not to stare at his unexpected guest. In the better light of the kitchen, he could see that, beneath the dirt and exhaustion, Victoria Thornton was indeed a striking woman. Her hair, which he now saw was a rich auburn, was coming loose from what had once been a neat arrangement. Her eyes, dark and wary, missed nothing as they scanned the room. "Your home is very orderly," she commented, clearly surprised. Owen smiled slightly. "My mother wouldn't have it any other way. She taught me well before she passed." He placed a steaming bowl of stew and a chunk of bread before her. Victoria didn't wait for ceremony. She ate with the desperate hunger of someone who didn't know when their next meal would come. "There's more if you want it," Owen said quietly. Victoria paused, bread halfway to her mouth. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me." Owen leaned against the counter, considering her question. "I reckon everyone deserves a helping hand sometimes. 6 years ago, I came back from the war with nothing but nightmares and a bad leg. If it weren't for the kindness of strangers, I wouldn't be here." Something in his words seemed to reach her, and Victoria's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you," she said simply, before returning to her meal. When she had finished, Owen showed her to the small guest room upstairs. Bathrooms down the hall if you want to clean up. There should be some of my mother's old things in the trunk if you need something to wear. Victoria stood awkwardly in the doorway, her fingers clutching the worn fabric of her dress. Mr. Newcomb. Owen, he corrected. Owen, she repeated, the name sounding foreign on her tongue. I won't be here when you wake up. I need to keep moving. He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The door doesn't lock from the outside, Miss Thornton. You're free to go whenever you choose. But if you're running from something dangerous, maybe consider that 2 heads are better than 1 for solving problems. Victoria didn't respond, but the slight tremble in her lower lip told Owen everything he needed to know. Whatever trouble had found this woman, it wasn't something trivial. Good night, Miss Thornton, he said, tipping his hat slightly before turning away. Sleep well. Owen woke before dawn, as was his custom. He moved quietly through his morning routine, mindful of his guest. Part of him expected to find the guest room empty, the front door left ajar in her haste to continue her journey. But as he made his way downstairs, the unmistakable sound of movement in the kitchen caught his attention. Victoria stood at the stove, her back to him. She had found one of his mother's old dresses, a simple blue cotton thing that hung a bit loose on her frame but was decidedly cleaner than what she'd arrived in. Her hair, now clean and brushed, was tied back with a ribbon. You're still here, Owen observed, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. Victoria turned, spatula in hand. I thought I should earn my keep before leaving. It's not much, but I made eggs. Owen moved to the table, noticing it had been set for 2. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to, she replied simply, bringing the pan to the table and dividing the eggs between their plates. Besides, I realized I have nowhere else to go right now. Owen nodded, accepting her unspoken request to stay longer. You're welcome here as long as you need. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Victoria spoke again. I saw your fields from the window. Do you run this place alone? Mostly, Owen replied. I hire help during planting and harvest and for cattle drives, but day to day it's just me. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. That's a lot of work for one man. Owen shrugged. It keeps me busy, keeps the memories at bay. He hadn't meant to say that last part out loud, and he quickly changed the subject. If you're staying, I should introduce you to the rest of the property. After breakfast, Owen showed Victoria around the ranch. The main house sat on a gentle rise, overlooking acres of grazing land and fields. A small creek cut through the property, providing water for the cattle and irrigation for the crops. The barn where they had met the night before housed 4 horses, including Owen's favorite mare, Duchess. She's beautiful, Victoria said, reaching out tentatively to stroke the horse's neck. She's stubborn as the day is long, but a loyal girl, Owen replied, watching as Duchess leaned into Victoria's touch. Seems she likes you. Victoria smiled, the first genuine smile Owen had seen from her, and it transformed her face entirely. I had a horse when I was a girl. My father taught me to ride before I could walk, practically. You ride well, then, Victoria nodded, a faraway look in her eyes. I used to, it's been a while. Well, if you're staying, you're welcome to exercise Duchess. She could use the attention. Victoria's smile faded and the wariness returned to her eyes. About that, how long would it be possible for me to stay? I have some money, not much, but I can pay for room and board. Owen shook his head. Keep your money. You can stay as long as you need to sort things out. In return, if you're willing, I could use help around the house. My cooking skills are passable at best. Victoria studied him, clearly trying to determine if there was an angle to his generosity. Just housework, Owen confirmed, understanding her implication. You have my word as a gentleman. Some of the tension left Victoria's shoulders. Then you have a deal, Mr. Newcomb. Owen, he corrected again with a small smile. Owen, Victoria repeated, and this time the name sounded less foreign on her lips. As they walked back toward the house, Owen couldn't help but ask, "Will you tell me what you're running from, Victoria, or who?" Victoria's pace faltered slightly. "Not today," she said quietly. "Maybe not ever." Owen accepted her answer with a nod. "Fair enough. But if trouble comes looking for you, I'd rather not be caught unprepared." Victoria stopped walking entirely, turning to face him with a seriousness that hadn't been there before. "If trouble comes looking for me, Mr. Newcomb, your best course of action would be to hand me over without a fight. I wouldn't want your kindness to be repaid with danger." Owen met her gaze steadily. "I don't frighten easy, Miss Thornton, and I've never been one to hand over someone who's come to me for protection." Their eyes locked for a long moment, a silent battle of wills. Finally, Victoria looked away. "Then I pray it doesn't come to that." The next week passed in a comfortable rhythm. Victoria proved to be a capable housekeeper and an excellent cook. Owen found himself looking forward to returning to the house each evening, where a hot meal and conversation awaited him. It had been years since he'd shared his table with anyone on a regular basis, and he hadn't realized how much he'd missed the simple pleasure of company. For her part, Victoria seemed to relax a little more each day. The dark circles under her eyes faded, and she began to explore the property more freely. Owen often spotted her sitting by the creek, book in hand, or exercising Duchess in the corral. She was still guarded about her past, deflecting personal questions with practiced ease, but the constant fear that had shadowed her eyes upon arrival had dimmed somewhat. On Sunday morning, Owen came downstairs to find Victoria dressed in one of his mother's better dresses, a pale yellow thing with lace at the collar. "I thought I might accompany you to church," she said, smoothing her hands over the fabric nervously. "That is, if you're going, and if it wouldn't cause too much gossip to have me along." Owen, who had indeed been planning to attend the weekly service in Amarillo, smiled. "I'd be honored to have your company. As for gossip, well, small towns run on the stuff. Best not to give it too much mind." The ride into town was pleasant, the early summer heat not yet oppressive. Victoria sat beside Owen in the wagon, her posture straight but her hands fidgeting slightly with her reticule. "Nervous?" Owen asked as the church spire came into view. "A bit," Victoria admitted. "It's been a while since I've been among so many people." "The folks here are good people for the most part," Owen assured her. "Curious but good-hearted. If anyone asks, we'll just say you're a friend of the family staying for the summer." Victoria nodded, taking a deep breath as Owen pulled the wagon to a stop near the church. He helped her down, offering his arm as they approached the white clapboard building. Several heads turned their way, curious eyes taking in the newcomer at Owen's side. "Owen Newcomb, is that you with a lady on your arm?" called a booming voice. A large man with a sheriff's badge pinned to his chest approached, grinning widely. "Must be the end of days." Owen rolled his eyes but smiled at his old friend. "Sheriff Wade Rogers, meet Miss Victoria Thornton. She's staying at the ranch for a while." Wade's eyebrows rose in surprise, but he tipped his hat politely. "Miss Thornton, a pleasure. Any friend of Owen's is welcome in Amarillo." Victoria returned the greeting with a polite nod, her grip tightening slightly on Owen's arm. Other introductions followed as more townsfolk arrived for the service. Owen noticed how Victoria tensed whenever newcomers approached, but relaxed slightly when they moved on without asking too many questions. The service itself was unremarkable, though Owen found himself distracted by Victoria's presence beside him. He was accustomed to attending church alone, sitting in his usual pew near the back. Having Victoria share his hymnal, her shoulder occasionally brushing his, was a novel experience that left him more aware of her than he cared to admit. After the service, they declined invitations to Sunday dinner, much to the disappointment of several of the town's more matchmaking-minded matrons. "I need to check on the new calves," Owen explained. "Another time, perhaps." As they drove back to the ranch, Victoria seemed lost in thought. "Your friends seem nice," she finally said. "Especially the sheriff." Owen nodded. "Wade and I fought together in the war. He's a good man, fair and honest." Victoria turned to look at him directly. Would he help someone in trouble, someone who might be wanted by another lawman? Owen's hands tightened on the reins. "Wade believes in justice, not just the letter of the law. If someone was in genuine trouble, he'd hear them out before passing judgment." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "Is that your situation, Victoria? Are you wanted by the law?" Victoria looked away, her profile sharp against the backdrop of the Texas plains. "Not exactly," she said quietly. "But the man I'm running from has the law in his pocket where he's from." It was the most she had revealed about her situation since arriving, and Owen knew better than to push for more. "Well, if it comes to that, Wade would listen to your side of things." "As would I." Victoria didn't respond, but she seemed to relax slightly as the ranch came into view. "Thank you for taking me to church today," she said as Owen helped her down from the wagon. "It felt normal. I haven't had much of that lately." Owen smiled, tipping his hat. "My pleasure, Miss Thornton." That night, as they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Owen sensed a shift in Victoria's demeanor. She seemed more settled, less like a bird ready to take flight at the slightest provocation. "I was engaged to be married," she said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. "Back in Missouri." Owen turned to look at her, surprised by the unexpected confidence. Victoria nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "His name is Randall Porter. His family owns half the businesses in our town, including the bank where my father worked." She took a deep breath. "My father died last year a heart attack," they said. Afterward, Mr. Porter, Randall's father, informed me that my father had taken out substantial loans that were now due in full. Owen frowned. "That doesn't sound right." "It wasn't," Victoria confirmed, her voice hardening. "My father was the most honest man I've ever known. He would never have borrowed money he couldn't repay, but I had no proof, just my word against the Porters." "So they forced you to agree to marry Randall to clear the debt," Owen guessed. Victoria nodded, her fingers tracing the faint scar on her cheek that Owen had noticed when they first met. "Randall is a cruel man. He hides it well in public, plays the part of the devoted fiancé. But in private," she shuddered. "When I told him I was breaking off our engagement, he made it clear that wasn't an option." Owen felt a surge of anger at the faceless man who had hurt her. "So you ran?" "I ran," Victoria confirmed. "I took what little money I had saved, some jewelry that had been my mother's, and left in the middle of the night. I've been traveling for nearly 2 months, taking odd jobs when I could, moving on whenever I heard rumors of a man asking questions about a woman fitting my description." "And you ended up in my barn," Owen finished for her. Victoria's lips curved into a small smile. "I ended up in your barn. I had planned to rest for just a few hours before continuing west. I never expected." She trailed off, looking at Owen with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. "You never expected what?" he prompted gently. Victoria shook her head. "I never expected to find someone who would help me without asking for anything in return. It seems too good to be true, sometimes." Owen reached across the space between them, hesitating briefly before covering her hand with his own. "Not everyone wants something from you, Victoria. Some of us just want to help." Victoria looked down at their joined hands, but she didn't pull away. "I'm beginning to believe that might be true." The next morning, Owen was up before dawn as usual. He moved through his chores with practiced efficiency, his mind still turning over Victoria's revelations from the night before. Her story explained much her wariness, her reluctance to be seen in town, her nightmares that sometimes echoed through the house in the dead of night. As he was mending a fence in the north pasture, he spotted a rider approaching from the direction of town. Straightening up, he recognized Wade Rogers' broad shoulders and distinctive hat. "Morning, Owen," Wade called as he drew nearer. "Hope I'm not interrupting." Owen set down his tools. "Nothing that can't wait. What brings you all the way out here on a Monday morning?" Wade dismounted, tying his horse to the fence post. "Information, mostly. Got a telegram from a sheriff over in Missouri. He's looking for a woman, Victoria Thornton. Says she's wanted for theft." Owen's expression remained neutral, though his heart rate quickened. "That's so." Wade studied him carefully. "The description matches your house guest pretty well. Auburn hair, dark eyes, around 25 years old." He paused. "The telegram says she stole valuable jewelry and money from her fiancé's family before disappearing." Owen crossed his arms. "And you believe that?" "I didn't say that," Wade replied evenly. "I know you well enough to figure there's more to the story. That's why I rode out here instead of bringing her in straight away." Owen appreciated his friend's discretion. "She was engaged to this man, Randall Porter. From what she's told me, he was abusive. The jewelry she took was her mother's and the money was her own savings. The Porters had been extorting her, claiming her father left debts that I suspect were fabricated." Wade nodded slowly. "I had a feeling it might be something like that." "The telegram came with an unusually large reward for a simple theft case." He sighed. "Still, I can't just ignore an official request from another lawman." "What are you going to do?" Owen asked, tension evident in his posture. "I'm going to make some inquiries," Wade said. "I've got contacts in that region who might be able to tell me more about this Porter family. In the meantime, you might want to consider moving Miss Thornton somewhere less obvious, just in case." Owen nodded, grateful for the warning. "I appreciate this, Wade." "Don't thank me yet," the sheriff cautioned. "If it turns out she's telling the truth, I'll do what I can to help, but if I find out otherwise—" He left the implication hanging. "She's telling the truth," Owen said with conviction. "I'd stake my life on it." Wade gave him a long, searching look. "You've known her, what, a week? And you're already this certain?" Owen didn't have a rational explanation for his certainty. He just knew deep in his gut that Victoria was genuine. "Some things you just know, Wade." The sheriff shook his head, a knowing smile playing at his lips. "I haven't seen that look on your face since before the war, Owen. Be careful your heart doesn't cloud your judgment." Owen wanted to protest, to deny that his feelings for Victoria were anything more than neighborly concern, but the words died on his lips. He hadn't allowed himself to examine those feelings too closely, but Wade's observation forced him to confront them. There was something about Victoria that had awakened parts of him he thought had died on the battlefield years ago. "Just do what you can," Owen said instead. "And if you hear anything about someone coming to look for her, you'll be the first to know," Wade promised, untying his horse. "In the meantime, maybe consider taking that trip to your uncle's old place near the New Mexico border. Might be a good time to check on those Mustangs you were talking about." Owen nodded, understanding the suggestion. "I'll think about it." After Wade departed, Owen headed back to the house, his mind racing. He found Victoria in the garden picking vegetables for dinner. She looked up as he approached, a smile warming her face in a way that made his heart stutter. "You're back early," she observed. "Is something wrong?" Owen didn't see any point in hiding the truth. Wade came by. "There's a telegram from Missouri asking about you." The color drained from Victoria's face, and the basket of vegetables slipped from her hands, scattering tomatoes across the dirt. "He's found me," she whispered. Owen quickly closed the distance between them, steadying her with his hands on her shoulders. "Wade's on our side. He's going to look into Porter's claims before doing anything." Victoria's eyes, wide with fear, searched his face. But what if he has to turn me in? What if— That's not going to happen, Owen said firmly. Wade suggested we might want to leave for a while just to be safe. I have an uncle with property near the New Mexico border. It's remote, hard to find unless you know where to look. Victoria shook her head. I can't ask you to uproot your life for me. You've already done too much. You're not asking. I'm offering, Owen replied. Besides, I've been meaning to check on the place anyway. There's a herd of Mustangs there that my uncle used to keep an eye on. Victoria still looked uncertain. What about the ranch, your cattle? I can ask my neighbor, Jim Wilkins, to keep an eye on things. It wouldn't be the first time. Owen squeezed her shoulders gently. What do you say? Will you come with me? Victoria took a deep, shaky breath. When would we leave? Tomorrow, at first light. It's a 3-day journey if we push hard. Victoria nodded, decision made. Then we'd better start packing. They spent the rest of the day preparing for their departure. Owen rode over to the Wilkins place to arrange for the care of his livestock, while Victoria packed provisions and clothing. By nightfall, everything was ready for an early departure. As they sat down to what might be their last dinner at the ranch for some time, a heavy silence hung between them. Victoria had been quiet since Owen delivered the news, her thoughts clearly far away. We'll be all right, Owen said, trying to reassure her. My uncle's place is well hidden, and Wade will send word when it's safe to return. Victoria pushed her food around her plate. What if it's never safe to return? She asked softly. What if Randall never gives up? Owen reached across the table, covering her hand with his own. Then we'll figure something else out. Maybe a fresh start somewhere else, California or even Canada. Victoria looked up, surprise evident in her eyes. Owen realized his presumption too late. I just meant. That is, if you wanted company. I thank you, Victoria interrupted, turning her hand to grip his. For saying we, for making me feel like I'm not alone in this. Owen's heart swelled at her words. You're not alone, Victoria, not anymore. Their gazes held for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then Victoria withdrew her hand, a flush rising to her cheeks. We should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. Owen nodded, rising to clear the dishes. You're right, I'll wake you before dawn. They departed just as the first hints of light were breaking across the eastern horizon. Owen had saddled Duchess for Victoria and his gelding, Thunder, for himself. 2 pack horses carried their supplies and a few personal belongings. As they rode away from the ranch, Owen glanced back at the house that had been his home for the past 6 years. He'd never left it for more than a few days since settling there after the war. We'll come back, Victoria said, reading his thoughts. When it's safe. Owen nodded, turning to face forward again. I know we will. The first day's travel was uneventful. They rode across the open plains of the Texas Panhandle, the June sun beating down relentlessly. Victoria proved to be an excellent rider, just as she'd claimed, keeping pace with Owen without complaint, despite the grueling conditions. They made camp that night near a small creek, far from any established trail. As they sat by the fire after dinner, Victoria seemed more relaxed than she had been since learning of the telegram. Tell me about this place we're going to, she said, wrapping her arms around her knees. Your uncle's ranch. Owen poked at the fire, sending sparks dancing into the night sky. It's not much of a ranch, really. More of a lined shack with some decent grazing land around it. My uncle was something of a hermit, preferred the company of wild horses to people. Sounds like an interesting man, Victoria observed. Owen smiled at the memory of his eccentric relative. He was. Taught me more about horses than anyone else ever could. He died a few years back, left the place to me. I've been meaning to check on it, maybe fix it up a bit, but never seemed to find the time. Victoria stared into the flames. And now you're going there because of me. leaving your home, your livelihood. It's just a place, Victoria, Owen said quietly, and cattle will be there when we get back. Some things are more important. Victoria looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. Why are you really helping me, Owen? And don't say it's common decency. No one risks this much for a stranger out of decency alone. Owen considered her question carefully. When I came back from the war, I was broken. Not just my leg, but inside. I'd seen things, done things that haunted me. For a long time, I didn't think I deserved anything good in my life. Victoria listened intently, her expression softening. Then one day, an old man found me drunk outside a saloon in Albuquerque. Instead of leaving me there, he got me on my feet, gave me work on his ranch, taught me how to live again. Owen smiled at the memory. He had no reason to help me, but he did. Changed my life. So when I found you in my barn, I figured maybe it was my turn to pass that kindness along. Victoria's eyes glistened with unshed tears. That's a good answer, she whispered. It's the truth, Owen replied. But there's more to it now. He hesitated, unsure how to express the growing feelings he had for her without frightening her away. Victoria saved him from his struggle. I know, she said softly. I feel it too. The admission hung between them, delicate as spun glass. Neither moved to bridge the physical gap between them, but something had shifted. A door opened that could never truly be closed again. We should get some sleep, Owen finally said. Another long day tomorrow. Victoria nodded, but her eyes lingered on his face a moment longer before she retreated to her bedroll. Owen sat by the fire long after Victoria had fallen asleep, turning their conversation over in his mind. He hadn't planned on developing feelings for his mysterious guest, and the timing couldn't be worse. But there was no denying the truth of it now. Somewhere between finding her in his barn and riding away from his ranch with her, Victoria Thornton had become important to him in a way no one had in a very long time. The next morning brought clouds and the promise of rain. They broke camp quickly, hoping to make significant progress before the weather turned. By midday, the skies had darkened ominously, and thunder rumbled in the distance. There's a trading post about an hour's ride from here, Owen called over his shoulder. We might be able to wait out the storm there. Victoria nodded, pulling her coat tighter against the rising wind. Lead the way. They pushed their horses harder, racing against the approaching storm. The first fat drops of rain began to fall just as the trading post came into view, a sturdy log building with a corral and small stable attached. As they dismounted, the heavens opened in earnest, sending them rushing for the shelter of the building. Inside, the trading post was warm and dry, with a pot-bellied stove burning in the corner. A few other travelers had also sought refuge from the storm, clustered around tables with coffee or whiskey. The proprietor, a grizzled man with one good eye, nodded at Owen. Newcomb, been a while. Harlan, Owen greeted him, passing through. This is Miss Thornton. Harlan's gaze lingered on Victoria a moment longer than was polite. Madam, he said finally. Coffee's hot if you want it. Got stew on the stove, too. Coffee would be wonderful, Victoria replied. For both of us. They found a table in the corner, away from the other patrons. The trading post served as something of a way station for travelers in this remote region, offering basic supplies, simple meals, and occasionally rooms for those caught in bad weather. Looks like the storm's settling in, Owen observed, glancing out the window at the driving rain. We might need to stay the night. Victoria tensed, her eyes scanning the room. Is it safe? Harlan runs a clean place. Mind your own business, he minds his. We'll be fine for one night. Victoria nodded, though she didn't fully relax. Owen understood her caution. Every new face was a potential threat, every stop a chance for Randall Porter to catch up with them. Harlan brought over 2 mugs of coffee and 2 bowls of stew. Got one room left if you're staying, he said, his good eye fixed on Owen. 2 beds. We'll take it, Owen replied, sliding coins across the table. Harlan pocketed the money. Up the stairs, last door on the left, I'll have your horses seen to. As they ate, Owen noticed Victoria watching a man who had just entered, shaking rain from his coat. Something about him had caught her attention. What is it? Owen asked quietly. Victoria leaned closer, pitching her voice low. That man. I've seen him before in Amarillo. He was asking questions at the general store. Owen casually glanced at the newcomer, a thin man with a neat beard and expensive clothes that marked him as out of place in this remote outpost. Are you sure? Victoria nodded, her knuckles white around her coffee mug. He works for Randall's father. His name is Morris. Owen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain outside. He hasn't seen you yet. Keep your head down. I'll handle this. Victoria didn't argue, turning her face away from the room and toward the wall. Owen watched as Harlan directed the new arrival to a table on the opposite side of the room. The man, Morris, ordered whiskey and began to talk with Harlan, his voice too low for Owen to hear from their position. We need to leave, Victoria whispered. If he recognizes me, in this weather, we wouldn't make it 5 miles, Owen countered. Our best bet is to stay put, get to our room, and leave at first light before he's up. Victoria's fear was palpable, but she nodded, trusting his judgment. They finished their meal quickly, then made their way upstairs without looking toward Morris's table. Owen could feel the man's eyes on them as they ascended the stairs, but refused to give him the satisfaction of acknowledging his presence. The room was small but clean, with 2 narrow beds separated by a nightstand. A single window looked out over the rain-soaked landscape, and a washstand stood in the corner with a pitcher of water and basin. As soon as the door closed behind them, Victoria began to pace. He'll have recognized me. Or if not, he'll have noticed a woman traveling with a man and gotten suspicious. Even if he did, Owen reasoned, he can't be certain it's you, and he can't do anything tonight with this storm. Victoria wasn't consoled. You don't know these people, Owen. The Porters have connections everywhere. Money buys loyalty, and they have plenty of it. Owen moved to her side, gently taking her by the shoulders to halt her pacing. Victoria, look at me. When she did, he continued, we're going to be fine. Tomorrow, we'll be back on the trail before dawn, and by nightfall, we'll reach my uncle's place where no one will find us. Victoria searched his face, seeking reassurance. You make it sound so simple. It is simple, Owen insisted. We just need to get through tonight. A knock at the door startled them both. Victoria's eyes widened in alarm, but Owen motioned for her to stay calm. Who is it? He called. Harlan, came the reply. Got some extra blankets. Gets cold up here at night. Owen moved to the door, opening it just enough to take the offered blankets. Thank you. Harlan nodded, his good eye darting briefly past Owen to Victoria before he turned away. Owen closed and locked the door, an uneasy feeling settling in his gut. Something about Harlan's manner had changed. He knows, Victoria said, voicing Owen's own suspicion. Or at least he suspects. Owen set the blankets down. Maybe, but Harlan's not one to get involved in other people's business unless there's good money in it. The implication hung heavy in the air. If Morris was offering a reward, Harlan might be tempted to help him. We should leave now, Victoria insisted. Storm or no storm. Owen moved to the window, peering out at the driving rain and howling wind. That's a good way to get lost, or worse. We'd be putting ourselves in more danger, not less. Victoria sank onto one of the beds, defeat evident in the slump of her shoulders. What do we do then? Owen sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. We take turns keeping watch, get some rest when we can. And we leave the moment the storm breaks, even if it's the middle of the night. Victoria nodded, leaning slightly into his solid presence. I'm sorry for bringing this trouble to your doorstep, Owen. "Don't be," he replied, his voice soft but firm. "I'm not." Victoria looked up at him, surprise in her eyes. "How can you say that? You've had to leave your home, you're in danger, all because of me." Owen reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face in a gesture more intimate than any they had shared before. "Because meeting you has woken me up, Victoria. For years, I've been just existing, going through the motions. You've reminded me what it feels like to care about someone deeply again." Victoria's breath caught at his words. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the tension between them palpable. Then, with a courage that surprised even herself, Victoria closed the distance between them and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative and questioning. But when Owen's arms came around her, drawing her closer, it deepened into something more urgent, more desperate. It was a kiss born of fear and hope, of uncertainty and newfound trust. When they finally broke apart, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the moment you smiled at Duchess," he admitted. Victoria laughed softly, the sound both surprised and delighted. "I've wanted you to do that since you offered me shelter without asking anything in return." Owen's smile faded slightly as he pulled back to look at her. "Victoria, when this is over, when you're safe, I want you to know that you don't owe me anything. Not your affection, not your future. Just because I've helped you." Victoria silenced him with a finger to his lips. "I know that, Owen. What I feel for you has nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with who you are." Her eyes searched his. "Do you believe me?" Owen nodded, turning to press a kiss to her palm. "I do." They settled into a watchful night, taking turns to sleep while the other kept vigil. The storm continued unabated, rain lashing against the window and wind howling around the eaves of the building. Despite the circumstances, there was a new peace between them, a shared understanding that whatever came next, they would face it together. Around 3 in the morning, as Owen sat by the window during his watch, the rain finally began to slacken. By 4, it had stopped entirely, though dark clouds still obscured the moon and stars. "Victoria," he whispered, gently shaking her awake. "The storm's past, we should go." She was instantly alert, years of caution having trained her to wake quickly. "Has there been any movement downstairs?" "Not that I've heard," Owen replied, already gathering their few belongings. "But let's not take chances." They moved silently, preparing to depart. The trading post was quiet, most of its occupants still asleep in the pre-dawn darkness. Owen eased the door open, wincing at the slight creak of the hinges, and peered into the hallway. Empty. They crept down the stairs, avoiding the steps they knew would groan under their weight. The main room of the trading post was deserted save for Harlan, who slept in a chair behind the counter, a shotgun across his lap. "The back door," Owen mouthed, pointing toward the kitchen area. They had nearly reached it when a floorboard creaked beneath Victoria's foot. Both froze, eyes darting to Harlan, who stirred but didn't wake. After a tense moment, they continued their careful progress, slipping into the kitchen and out the back door. The night air was cool and damp after the storm, the ground soft and muddy beneath their boots. Owen led the way to the stable, where their horses had been sheltered overnight. To his relief, all 4 animals were present and appeared well cared for. "Saddle Duchess," Owen instructed quietly. "I'll get the others ready." They worked efficiently in the darkness, speaking only when necessary. Within minutes, all 4 horses were saddled and their belongings secured. Owen was just helping Victoria mount when a voice called from the stable entrance. "Going somewhere?" They turned to find Morris standing there, a pistol in his hand pointed steadily at them. Behind him loomed Harlan, his shotgun at the ready. "Step away from the lady, mister," Morris said, his voice cultured but cold. "Miss Thornton and I have business to conclude." Owen didn't move, his body positioned protectively between Victoria and the gun. The lady isn't going anywhere she doesn't want to go. Morris smiled thinly. I'm afraid that's not your decision to make. Mr. Porter is quite eager for his fiancée to return home where she belongs. I'm not his fiancée, Victoria said, her voice steady despite the fear Owen could feel radiating from her. And that's not my home. Morris sighed, as if dealing with a particularly stubborn child. Now, Miss Thornton, we both know your father's debts won't pay themselves. Mr. Porter has been most patient, but his generosity has limits. There are no debts, Victoria shot back. My father never borrowed a penny from the Porters. They forged those documents after his death to force me into marrying Randall. Morris's expression hardened. Dangerous accusations, Miss Thornton. I'd advise you to watch your tongue. Or what? Owen challenged. You'll shoot us both. That would be difficult to explain to the local authorities. Accidents happen all the time in these parts, Harlan interjected, patting his shotgun meaningfully. Especially to folks who don't know the territory well. Owen's mind raced, assessing their options. Duchess was still between him and Victoria, providing some cover. Thunder was just behind him, already saddled. If they could create a distraction. How much is Porter paying you? Owen asked Harlan, stalling for time. Enough, the older man replied with a shrug. More than you could match Newcomb. I wouldn't be so sure about that, Owen countered. I've got money saved. Land too, what's your price? Morris scoffed. Don't bother trying to buy your way out of this. Harlan knows better than to cross the Porters. He gestured with his gun. Now, Miss Thornton, if you'd kindly come with me. Your fiancé is quite worried about you. Victoria's hand found Owen's arm, squeezing it urgently. He understood the silent message she wasn't going back, not alive anyway. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Owen said slowly, shifting his weight subtly. You seem to be under the impression that we're giving you a choice in the matter. Before Morris could respond, Owen gave a sharp whistle. Thunder, trained to respond to that signal, reared up violently, creating an instant distraction. In the same motion, Owen shoved Victoria up onto Duchess's back and slapped the horse's flank hard. Ride, he shouted. Duchess bolted forward, nearly trampling Morris, who dove out of the way with a curse. Harlan raised his shotgun, but Owen was already in motion, leaping onto Thunder's back as the horse came down from his rear. A shot rang out, the bullet whistling past Owen's ear as he urged Thunder after Duchess. More shots followed, but they were already racing into the darkness, leaving the trading post behind. They rode hard, following a creek bed that would mask their tracks. The packhorses followed obediently, trained to stay with the lead animals. When they finally slowed after nearly an hour of breakneck riding, Victoria was shaking. Are you hurt? Owen asked urgently, drawing alongside her. Victoria shook her head, her knuckles white on the reins. No, you. I'm fine, Owen assured her, though his heart was still pounding from their narrow escape. But they'll be after us. We need to keep moving. Victoria nodded, her face set with determination. How much farther to your uncle's place? If we push hard, we can be there by sunset, Owen replied. It's rough country ahead, but that works in our favor. Harder to track us. They rode through the day, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and eat a cold meal from their provisions. The terrain grew increasingly rugged as they approached the border region, transitioning from open plains to rocky hills dotted with pinyon pines and juniper. Owen led them along game trails and dry creek beds, consciously choosing routes that would be difficult to follow. By late afternoon, they had seen no sign of pursuit, but Owen remained vigilant. Morris didn't strike him as the type to give up easily, especially with whatever reward the Porters were offering. There, Owen said finally, pointing to a narrow canyon ahead. My uncle's place is just beyond that ridge. Victoria squinted against the setting sun. It's well hidden. That was the idea, Owen replied with a slight smile. Uncle Samuel valued his privacy almost as much as his Mustangs. They wound their way through the canyon, emerging into a small, sheltered valley. A sturdy log cabin stood near one wall of the canyon, partially obscured by cottonwood trees. A corral and small barn completed the homestead. As they approached, Owen noticed signs that the place wasn't as abandoned as he'd expected. The corral held several horses, and smoke curled from the cabin's chimney. "Someone's here," he said, drawing Thunder to a stop. "Stay behind me." Before Victoria could respond, the cabin door opened, and a figure emerged, a tall, lean man with silver hair and a weathered face that broke into a smile of recognition. "Owen Newcomb, as I live and breathe," the man called. "About time you came to check on your inheritance." Owen relaxed, returning the smile. "Marcus, I thought you'd moved on to Colorado, tried it," the older man replied, coming forward to greet them. "Too damn cold for these old bones. Figured you wouldn't mind if I kept an eye on the place." His gaze shifted to Victoria, curiosity evident. "And who might this lovely lady be?" "Victoria Thornton," Owen replied, dismounting and helping Victoria down from Duchess. "Victoria, this is Marcus Webb, my uncle's oldest friend and the best horse trainer west of the Mississippi." Marcus tipped his hat. "Madam, any friend of Owen's is welcome here." Owen's expression grew serious. "We're in a bit of trouble, Marcus. Men following us, at least 2, possibly more by now. They mean Victoria harm." The old man's eyes narrowed, but he asked no questions. "Well then, let's get you both inside and those horses out of sight. We can talk details over dinner." The cabin's interior was simple but comfortable, with a stone fireplace, sturdy wooden furniture, and walls lined with books Samuel Newcomb's passion besides horses. Marcus had kept the place clean and in good repair, a fact Owen noted with gratitude. Over a dinner of venison stew and cornbread, Owen explained their situation, omitting nothing. Marcus listened without interruption, his weathered face grave. "Porters," he said when Owen finished. "Banking family from Missouri. Had dealings with them years back. Hard people, especially the old man." Victoria nodded. "That's them. Randall is the son, my former fiancé." Marcus studied her thoughtfully. "And they went to all this trouble sending men across state lines just to bring you back for marriage." Victoria's hands twisted in her lap. "There's more to it than that. My father was the bank's chief accountant. Before he died, he discovered irregularities in the book's evidence that the Porters were embezzling from their own customers. I believe they killed him to keep him quiet, then tried to use me to ensure any evidence he might have left behind would never come to light." Owen stared at her in shock. "You never mentioned this before." "Because I can't prove it," Victoria replied, pain evident in her voice. "I found notes in my father's papers after his death, but nothing concrete enough to take to the authorities. And then the Porters announced my father's debts and made their proposition. I knew then that they were afraid of what I might discover if I looked too closely." Marcus whistled low. "That changes things. They won't stop looking for you, not if you're a threat to their whole operation. Which is why we need to end this," Owen said firmly, "not just run and hide." Victoria looked at him in alarm. "What are you suggesting?" "We need proof," Owen replied. "Something solid enough to take to the federal authorities, not just the local law that the Porters control." Marcus nodded slowly. "Makes sense. But how do you propose to get such proof when it's back in Missouri?" Owen rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "Maybe it's not all back in Missouri. Victoria, did your father keep any copies of his records, anything he might have hidden away?" Victoria's eyes widened. "There was a box, his strong box. I couldn't open it before I fled. I left it buried beneath the rosebush in our garden in Willow Creek." "Then that's where we need to go," Owen said decisively. "You can't be serious," Victoria protested. "Willow Creek is the first place they'll be watching." "Which is why we need a plan," Owen countered. And help. He turned to Marcus. I hate to ask, but the old man waved him off. Don't even start. Samuel would have my hide if I didn't help his nephew. Besides, he added with a twinkle in his eye, I've never much liked bankers. They stayed up late into the night, formulating a strategy. Marcus knew people throughout the territories who owed him favors, former rangers, lawmen, and a few whose professions were best not discussed in polite company. Give me 2 weeks, the old trainer said. I can have a network in place from here to Missouri. Get messages through, keep an eye on Porter's men. Owen nodded. Meanwhile, Victoria and I will stay here out of sight. If Morris and Harlan are still on our trail, this valley is defensible. Marcus agreed. I'll ride out at first light. Got a friend in Santa Fe who'll get telegrams sent without questions. We'll start putting the pieces in place. That night, Owen and Victoria shared the cabin's second bedroom, the threat of pursuit having eliminated any pretense of propriety. As they lay in the darkness, Victoria's voice broke the silence. Are you sure about this, Owen? It's not too late to walk away. This isn't your fight. Owen turned to face her, though he could barely make out her features in the darkness. It became my fight the moment you walked into my life, Victoria, and even if it hadn't, what the Porters are doing is wrong. Someone needs to stop them. Victoria's hand found his beneath the blankets. I'm afraid, she admitted. Not just for myself, but for you, for what might happen if we fail. Owen squeezed her fingers gently. We won't fail, and even if things don't go exactly to plan, we'll face it together. That's what matters. Victoria shifted closer, resting her head on his shoulder. When did you become so important to me? She wondered aloud. A few weeks ago, you were a stranger. Owen wrapped his arm around her, drawing her closer. Life has a funny way of bringing us exactly what we need, exactly when we need it. Victoria tilted her face up, finding his lips in the darkness. Unlike their first kiss, this one held no desperation, only a slow, burning certainty. When they finally parted, Owen knew with absolute clarity that whatever happened next, there was no turning back. His future was irrevocably bound to Victoria's. Sleep, he murmured against her hair. Tomorrow, we begin to fight back. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and waiting. Marcus rode out as promised, returning periodically with news and supplies. Owen spent the time repairing the cabin and corral, while Victoria tended the small garden that had gone somewhat wild in the years since Samuel's death. During the evenings, they plotted and planned, poring over maps and discussing every detail of their strategy. But there were also quieter moments, shared meals, walks in the valley, nights spent in each other's arms. Despite the looming danger, or perhaps because of it, their relationship deepened, growing from initial attraction into something far more substantial. I've been thinking, Owen said one evening as they sat on the cabin's porch, watching the sunset paint the canyon walls. When this is over, when you're truly free, what do you want to do? Victoria considered the question. I haven't let myself think that far ahead. For so long, it's just been about surviving the next day, the next week. Owen nodded, understanding. But if you could choose without fear or obligation, what would your life look like? Victoria's gaze drifted to the horizon. I'd want a home, not just a house, but a place that feels safe. I'd want work that matters, perhaps teaching, as I'd planned before my father died. She paused, her voice softening. And I'd want someone to share it with, someone kind and brave and honest. Owen's heart quickened at her words. Someone like me, he asked, only half joking. Victoria turned to him, her expression serious. Not someone like you, Owen, you, if you'll have me when this is all over. Owen took her hand, bringing it to his lips. Victoria Thornton, I'd have you now, tomorrow, and every day after. Though perhaps we should deal with Porter before planning the wedding. Victoria laughed, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. A practical approach. I approve. Their moment of happiness was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Both tensed until they recognized Marcus's distinctive whistle. The old trainer rode into the yard, his expression grim. "News from Amarillo," he called as he dismounted. "Porter himself has arrived with half a dozen hired guns. They're tearing the place apart looking for you too." Owen helped Victoria to her feet, his mind already shifting to their contingency plans. "How close are our preparations in Missouri?" "Nearly ready," Marcus replied, following them into the cabin. "Got word today. Our people are in position in Willow Creek." Porter left his son in charge there, but security around their house has been increased. Victoria paled slightly. "So they suspect we might try to return," Marcus shrugged. "Hard to say. Might just be general caution. The good news is, Porter being here means he's not there. And my contact in town says the federal bank examiner is due in Willow Creek in 3 weeks for a routine inspection." Owen's eyes lit with understanding. "Perfect timing. If we can get your father's evidence to the examiner, the Porters would be finished," Victoria finished for him. "But we have to move quickly, before Randall realizes what we're planning." They spent the night finalizing details. By morning, their course was set. Owen and Victoria would travel separately to Willow Creek, taking different routes to avoid detection. Marcus would remain behind to create a false trail for Porter and his men to follow, leading them on a wild chase through the territories. As dawn broke, Owen and Victoria prepared for their journey. They would be apart for nearly 2 weeks, Victoria traveling by train, Owen by horseback along less traveled routes. "I don't like the idea of you traveling alone," Owen admitted as he helped Victoria mount a fresh horse. She would ride to the nearest town with rail service, then continue her journey by train, disguised as a widow returning home. "I'll be fine," Victoria assured him, though her own heart was heavy at their separation. "Besides, we'll draw less attention this way. No one is looking for a solitary widow." Owen adjusted her hat, using the gesture as an excuse to touch her one last time. "Be careful. If anything seems wrong, anything at all, I'll abort the plan and meet you at the fallback location," Victoria finished for him. "I remember." Owen nodded, stepping back reluctantly. 2 weeks. We meet at Widow Jensen's boarding house in Willow Creek." Victoria gave him a brave smile. 2 weeks, not a day longer. With a final look, she turned her horse and rode away, following the narrow trail that led out of the canyon. Owen watched until she disappeared from view, then turned to his own preparations. They had set their plan in motion. Now all they could do was trust in each other, and in the network of allies Marcus had assembled. The journey to Willow Creek was long and fraught with tension. Owen traveled by night when possible, avoiding main roads and towns. He crossed into Kansas without incident, but as he neared Missouri, he had to be increasingly cautious. Porter's influence grew stronger the closer he came to Willow Creek. 2 days before their planned rendezvous, Owen reached the outskirts of town. He established camp in a secluded copse of trees on the property of a farmer sympathetic to their cause, one of Marcus's many contacts. "Porter's boy has men watching the roads into town," the farmer, a grizzled man named Jenkins, informed him. "But your lady friend arrived safely 3 days ago. Been staying at the widow's place as planned. No one's given her a second look so far." Owen felt a wave of relief. "And the bank examiner, due next Tuesday," Jenkins confirmed. "Town's all abuzz about it. Seems the Porters are nervous, been working late at the bank every night." Owen smiled grimly. "Good. That means they haven't found whatever Victoria's father hid." "Speaking of hiding," Jenkins said, "best keep your head down until it's time. Randall Porter's offering a hefty reward for information about strangers asking questions." Owen nodded his understanding. For the next 2 days, he kept to the camp, venturing out only after dark to scout the town and familiarize himself with its layout. Willow Creek was smaller than he'd imagined a main street with the bank, a hotel, and various businesses, surrounded by residential streets lined with tidy homes. The Porter mansion stood on a hill overlooking the town, an ostentatious display of wealth amid the more modest dwellings. Even from a distance, Owen could see guards patrolling the grounds. Whatever evidence Victoria's father had hidden, the Porters were taking no chances of it being discovered. On the night before their planned meeting, Owen made his way cautiously to Widow Jensen's boarding house, a neat two-story building on a quiet side street. As arranged, he signaled his presence with 3 short taps on the back door. The door opened almost immediately, and Victoria stood before him, her face lighting with joy and relief. She wore a simple dark dress, her hair covered with a widow's cap, but to Owen she had never looked more beautiful. "You're here," she breathed, pulling him inside and into her arms. Owen held her tightly, burying his face in her neck and inhaling her familiar scent. "I've missed you," he murmured against her skin. Victoria drew back just enough to press her lips to his in a fierce kiss. "I was so worried. Every day I expected to hear that you'd been caught." "I'm harder to catch than that," Owen assured her with a smile. "Now tell me everything. What have you learned?" They moved to a small sitting room at the back of the house, where the widow Jensen, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who clearly knew more than she let on, served them tea before discreetly withdrawing. "I've located my old home," Victoria reported. "It's been sold, but it's vacant between tenants. The garden is overgrown, but the rosebush is still there. I'm certain that's where my father hid his strongbox." "Guards?" Owen asked. "None that I could see. The Porters don't seem to be watching it." Victoria's expression grew troubled. "But they are watching the bank examiner. He arrived early. He's staying at the hotel now, and Randall has been meeting with him, presumably trying to charm him before the actual inspection." Owen frowned. "That complicates things. We need to get to the examiner before Randall can completely win him over." Victoria nodded. "I've made inquiries. He dines alone at the hotel restaurant each evening. I thought perhaps I could approach him there, claim to have information about the bank." "Too risky," Owen countered. "Randall might recognize you, disguise or no. Let me make the approach." Victoria considered this. "Perhaps, but first we need the strongbox. We can't make accusations without proof." "Tonight, then," Owen decided. "We'll retrieve it tonight while the town sleeps." Their plan set, they spent the remaining daylight hours refining details. The widow Jensen provided them with a layout of the town, identifying which streets were most heavily patrolled and which offered the most cover. By nightfall, they were ready. Dressed in dark clothing, they slipped out the back door of the boarding house shortly after midnight. The town was quiet, most windows dark, though light still shone from the saloon down the main street. They kept to the shadows, moving swiftly but cautiously through back alleys and gardens. Victoria's former home stood on a corner lot, its windows dark and shuttered. The garden, once her pride and joy, had become a tangle of weeds and unruly bushes. "There," Victoria whispered, pointing to a large rosebush near the back fence. "That's where he would have hidden it." Owen kept watch while Victoria knelt beside the bush, using a small trowel they had brought. The ground was hard, but she worked methodically, digging around the base of the plant where it would be least noticeable. After several tense minutes, the trowel struck something solid. Victoria's breath caught. "I found it." Together, they unearthed a small metal box, tarnished by years beneath the soil but still intact. It was locked, as Victoria had expected. "We'll open it at the boarding house," Owen said, slipping the box into a sack. "Let's not linger." They had just reached the back gate when a voice called out from the street. "Who's there?" "This is private property," a town watchman making his rounds. Owen pushed Victoria toward the shadows. "Go, I'll distract him." Before she could protest, Owen stepped into the open, affecting a drunk stagger. "Evening, officer," he called, his voice deliberately slurred. "Fine night for a stroll, ain't it?" The watchman approached, lantern raised. "You're trespassing, mister. This house is vacant." Owen leaned against the fence, playing his role. "Is it now? Could have sworn this was the Sullivan place. Old Jim Sullivan invited me for a drink." "Sullivan lives 3 streets over," the watchman said impatiently. "You'd best be on your way before I take you in for the night." Owen nodded agreeably. "Right you are. My mistake entirely." He pushed off from the fence, stumbling slightly. "I'll just head over to Jim's then. Sorry to trouble you." The watchman watched him suspiciously but made no move to detain him. Owen wandered off in the direction indicated, making sure to maintain his drunken persona until he was well out of sight. Then, moving more purposefully, he circled back toward their planned rendezvous point behind the church. Victoria was waiting, the sack clutched tightly in her hands. "That was too close," she whispered as they fell into step together. "But successful," Owen pointed out, indicating the sack. "Let's get back before anyone else takes an interest in late-night strollers." They returned to the boarding house without further incident. In the safety of Victoria's room, they examined their prize. The strongbox was small but sturdy, with a combination lock securing its contents. "You know the combination?" Owen asked as Victoria turned the box in her hands. "I think so," she replied. "My father used meaningful dates for everything." She carefully rotated the dials. "My mother's birthday, my birthday, and the day he proposed to her." The lock clicked open. Inside, they found several leather-bound ledgers, a packet of letters, and various documents bearing the Porter Bank seal. Victoria's hands trembled as she opened the first ledger. "These are copies of the bank's transaction records," she said, scanning the neat columns of figures. "And here," she pointed to notes in the margin, written in a different hand, my father's annotations, highlighting discrepancies. Owen leaned closer, studying the pages. "Can you make sense of it?" Victoria nodded slowly. "I worked at the bank briefly before my father's death. These entries show money being moved from customer accounts into the Porter's personal holdings. Small amounts from each account, nothing the customers would notice, but adding up to thousands over time." "Embezzlement," Owen confirmed. "Enough to send them to prison." "More than enough," Victoria replied, turning more pages. "And there's more. Letters from customers questioning their balances, correspondence between my father and the senior porter about accounting irregularities. My father was building a case against them." "And they killed him for it," Owen said grimly. "Victoria, this is exactly what we need." With this evidence, the bank examiner can bring federal charges against the Porters. Victoria carefully returned the documents to the box. "We need to approach him carefully. If the Porters get wind of what we're doing before he sees the evidence." "Then we do it first thing tomorrow," Owen decided, "before they have any idea we're here." They spent the remainder of the night reviewing the documents, organizing the most damning evidence and preparing their presentation for the bank examiner. By dawn, they were ready. The hotel dining room was nearly empty when they entered the next morning. The bank examiner, a thin, scholarly-looking man with spectacles, sat alone at a corner table, reviewing papers as he ate. Owen approached first, Victoria a step behind. "Mr. Hawkins, my name is Owen Newcomb. This is Victoria Thornton. We need to speak with you on a matter of urgent banking business." Hawkins looked up, irritation crossing his features. "I don't discuss banking matters during breakfast, sir. If you have concerns about the Porter Bank, I suggest you make an appointment through proper channels." Victoria stepped forward, keeping her voice low. "Mr. Hawkins, I am the daughter of Edward Thornton, who served as chief accountant at Porter Bank until his death last year. We have evidence of systematic embezzlement by the Porter family, evidence my father was compiling when he was murdered. That caught Hawkins' attention. He studied Victoria closely. "Miss Thornton, I was told you had left town months ago." "I was forced to flee," Victoria replied. "After Randall Porter tried to silence me through intimidation and violence." Hawkins glanced around the dining room, suddenly wary. "This is a serious accusation. I cannot simply take your word for such matters." Owen placed the strongbox on the table. "We're not asking you to. We have documentation, account records, correspondence, my father's notes detailing the fraud. All we ask is that you review the evidence before conducting your examination." Hawkins hesitated, clearly torn between professional caution and curiosity. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. My room, in 10 minutes. We will not be disturbed there." Owen and Victoria exchanged relieved glances. The first hurdle cleared. In Hawkins' room, they laid out the evidence methodically. The examiner reviewed the documents with growing concern, asking sharp, insightful questions that Victoria answered confidently. "This is most disturbing," Hawkins said finally, removing his spectacles to polish them. "If verified, and I must verify everything, you understand this constitutes a massive breach of banking regulations and criminal law." "We understand," Owen assured him. "All we ask is a thorough and impartial investigation." "And protection," Victoria added. "The Porters will know where this information came from. They've already tried to silence me once." Hawkins nodded gravely. "I will telegraph my superiors immediately. Federal marshals can be here within days to secure the bank and its records." He looked at Victoria with genuine sympathy. "Miss Thornton, I am truly sorry for your loss. Your father appears to have been a man of principle." Victoria smiled sadly. "He was. All I want is justice for him and for all the people the Porters have stolen from." "And justice you shall have," Hawkins promised. "In the meantime, I suggest you both remain out of sight. If what you say about the Porters is true, they will not hesitate to act against you if they learn of your presence here." Owen and Victoria returned to the boarding house, a mixture of relief and anxiety churning within them. They had set events in motion that could not be stopped. The investigation of the Porters would proceed regardless of what happened to them now. But they were also more vulnerable than ever, trapped in a town controlled by their enemies while they waited for federal intervention. "We should leave," Owen suggested as they sat in Victoria's room, speaking in hushed tones. "Now that Hawkins has the evidence, there's no reason for us to stay. We can be halfway to Kansas by nightfall." Victoria shook her head. "No, I need to see this through. After everything my father suffered, everything I've endured, I want to see the looks on their faces when they're arrested." Owen understood her need for closure, though it worried him. "Then we stay hidden until the marshals arrive. No unnecessary risks." They maintained their vigil for 2 tense days. Hawkins sent word through the widow Jensen that federal marshals would arrive on Friday's train. Until then, he was proceeding with his examination as if nothing were amiss, gathering additional evidence from within the bank itself. On Thursday evening, their fragile peace was shattered. Owen was returning from a brief reconnaissance of the town when he spotted 2 unfamiliar men watching the boarding house from across the street. Their posture and vigilance marked them as hired guns, not casual observers. He circled around, entering through the back as before, and rushed upstairs to Victoria's room. "We've been discovered," he announced without preamble. "Porter's men are watching the house." Victoria paled but remained calm. "How? We've been so careful." "It doesn't matter," Owen replied, already gathering their essential belongings. "We need to move now before they decide to come in after us." The widow Jensen appeared in the doorway, her usually composed face creased with worry. "There are more of them at the front now, 4 men, all armed." Owen's mind raced through their options. The boarding house had only 2 exits, both now watched. They were effectively trapped. "Is there roof access?" he asked the widow. She nodded. "Trapdoor in the upstairs hallway leads to the flat portion of the roof and the building next door." Owen pressed. "How close is it?" "It's the milliner's shop. The roofs nearly touch at the back," Mrs. Jensen replied, understanding dawning in her eyes. "But it's a dangerous jump, especially in the dark." Owen turned to Victoria. "It's our best chance." We crossed to the milliner's, then down through that building and out the back. "From there, we can reach the stables where I've kept Thunder." Victoria nodded, her trust in him absolute. "Lead the way." Mrs. Jensen insisted on creating a distraction. "I'll tell them you paid your bill and left this morning," she said firmly. "That should buy you some time while they try to figure out where you've gone." Owen clasped the older woman's hand gratefully. "We can't thank you enough for everything you've done, Mrs. Jensen shooed them toward the hallway. "Thank me by staying alive. Now go." The trapdoor was stiff but opened with a firm push. Owen climbed through first, then helped Victoria onto the roof. The night was clear, stars providing just enough light to navigate the flat expanse of tar and gravel. At the back of the building, they found the gap between the boarding house and the milliner's shop. It was narrow, perhaps 3 feet, but enough to give pause, especially with a 15-foot drop to the alley below. "I'll go first," Owen said. "Then I can help you across." Victoria gripped his arm. "Be careful." Owen backed up several paces, took a deep breath, and ran. He cleared the gap with room to spare, landing with a muted thud on the neighboring roof. Turning, he gestured for Victoria to follow. She mimicked his approach, backing up to get a running start. But as she prepared to jump, voices rose from the alley below. "Check the roof." "Jensen's lying there still here." Victoria froze, momentarily paralyzed by the knowledge that they'd been discovered. Owen gestured urgently for her to jump anyway, but the hesitation cost her. A shot rang out, the bullet striking the roof near her feet. "Victoria, now," Owen called, reaching out across the gap. She ran, fear giving her speed. As she leaped, another shot sounded. Owen saw her falter in midair, her body twisting unnaturally. She hit the edge of the milliner's roof hard, scrambling for purchase as her legs dangled over the alley. Owen lunged forward, grabbing her arms and pulling with all his strength. She cried out in pain as he dragged her fully onto the roof, and he saw the spreading stain on her dress. A bullet had found its mark. "I'm all right," she gasped, though her face was white with shock. "It's just my arm. I can still move." There was no time to assess the damage properly. Shouts and footsteps told them their pursuers were now on the boarding house roof. Owen helped Victoria to her feet, supporting her as they stumbled toward the milliner's shop's roof access. The door was locked, but a well-placed kick splintered the wood. They hurried down the narrow stairs into the darkened shop, navigating by touch among mannequins and displays of hats and ribbons. "Back door," Owen whispered, guiding Victoria through the cluttered space. Behind them, they heard the crash of the roof door being forced open. Their pursuers were close. The back door of the shop led to a different alley than the one they'd seen from above. Owen oriented himself quickly. The stables were 2 blocks east, but with Victoria, injured, and armed men on their trail, reaching it would be challenging. "This way," he said, supporting her as they hurried through the dark alley. "Stay close to the buildings." They moved as swiftly as Victoria's injury allowed, ducking into doorways whenever they heard voices or footsteps. The town had come alive with the commotion, curious residents peering from windows, others venturing into the streets to see what the disturbance was about. They had almost reached the stables when disaster struck. Rounding a corner, they came face to face with Randall Porter himself, flanked by 2 of his men. The young banker's handsome face twisted with malice when he recognized Victoria. Well, he drawled, his hand moving to the pistol at his hip. "The prodigal fiancé returns." And with a new bow, no less. Owen pushed Victoria behind him, his own hand hovering near his gun. "It's over, Porter. The bank examiner has your father's records. Federal marshals are on their way." For a moment, uncertainty flickered across Randall's face. Then his confidence returned. "Unfortunate timing for you, then. By the time they arrive, you'll both have met with tragic accidents. Such a dangerous town at night." Owen knew they were outgunned and outmanned, but he also knew the town was now awake with witnesses all around. "You really want to murder us in front of half the town, Porter? Even your father's money can't buy that much silence." Randall hesitated, glancing around at the faces watching from windows and doorways. Then he smiled coldly. "You're right. Much better to do this properly." He raised his voice. "Sheriff, over here. I found the bank robbers." Owen's heart sank as he saw the town sheriff hurrying toward them, hand on his holster. In a town owned by the Porters, the law was just another weapon in their arsenal. "That's them, Sheriff," Randall continued smoothly. "The pair who broke into the bank last night. Dangerous criminals." The sheriff, a heavy-set man with a perpetually red face, looked uncertain. "Bank robbery? I didn't hear about no robbery, Mr. Porter." "My father didn't want to cause a panic," Randall replied smoothly. "We were handling it privately. But now that you're here, I must insist these criminals be taken into custody immediately." The sheriff looked from Randall to Owen and Victoria, clearly torn between his duty to the town's most powerful family and his own instincts. "They don't look like bank robbers to me, Mr. Porter." "Check the woman," Randall insisted. "She's injured because my guards shot her as they fled the bank." The sheriff stepped closer, noticing the blood on Victoria's dress for the first time. His hand moved to his gun. "That's not what happened," Victoria protested, her voice weak but determined. "He's lying. We have evidence of the Porter's crimes." "The bank examiner, silence," Randall snapped. "Sheriff, do your duty." The standoff might have ended badly had fate not intervened. A commotion at the end of the street drew everyone's attention, horses and riders, moving at speed toward them. As they drew nearer, Owen recognized the distinctive badges of U.S. Marshals. Relief washed over him. Hawkins must have sensed danger and summoned help earlier than planned. The lead marshal, a tall, imposing man with a thick mustache, reined in before them. "What's going on here, Sheriff?" The local lawman shuffled his feet nervously. "Just apprehending some suspects, Marshal. Town business." "Federal business now," the marshal corrected, dismounting. His cold gaze settled on Randall. "Randall Porter," Randall straightened, summoning his dignity. "Yes, and you are, Marshal James Calloway. You're under arrest for bank fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to obstruct justice." Randall's face drained of color. "This is absurd. On whose authority?" "The United States government," Calloway replied without emotion. "Bank examiner Hawkins contacted us yesterday with compelling evidence of widespread fraud at Porter Bank. We've already secured the premises and arrested your father." As the reality of his situation dawned on him, Randall's composure cracked. "Whatever they told you is lies. They're the criminals here." "She stole from us, ran away, save it for the judge," Calloway interrupted, gesturing for his deputies to take Randall into custody. He turned to Owen and Victoria. "Miss Thornton, Mr. Newcomb, Examiner Hawkins mentioned you might be in danger. Looks like he was right." Owen nodded, still supporting Victoria, who was growing weaker from blood loss. "She needs a doctor. She was shot during our escape." Calloway immediately called for assistance, and one of his men who had medical training came forward to examine Victoria's wound. "Clean through the upper arm," he reported after a careful inspection. "Missed the bone, but she's lost blood. Needs proper treatment." With the marshal's protection, they made their way to the town doctor. The elderly physician clucked disapprovingly at the wound but assured Owen it wasn't life-threatening. "She'll need rest and time to heal, but she's young and strong. She'll be fine." As the doctor worked, Marshal Calloway debriefed Owen on the situation. Hawkins was impressed by the evidence you brought him. Started his examination with particular attention to the accounts Miss Thornton's father had flagged. Found even more irregularities than you documented. And the porters? Owen asked. Senior Porter tried to run when we arrived at the bank this morning. Didn't get far. Calloway's expression was grimly satisfied. We've been building cases against corrupt bankers across 3 states, but the porters were particularly elusive. Your evidence was the key we needed. Owen felt a weight lift from his shoulders. So it's really over. For the porters? Yes, Calloway confirmed. They'll face trial in St. Louis, away from their sphere of influence. Given the evidence, I'd expect substantial prison sentences. After the doctor finished treating Victoria's wound, she insisted on speaking with Calloway herself. Despite her pallor and obvious exhaustion, she provided a detailed statement about her father's discoveries, her forced engagement to Randall, and the circumstances of her flight. Your father would be proud, Calloway told her when she had finished. His work will help restore funds to dozens of families who were victimized by the porters. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. That's all he would have wanted, justice for those people, not revenge. As night fell, the excitement in Willow Creek began to subside. The porters and their hired men were securely held in the town jail under federal guard. The bank was sealed, pending a complete audit. And Victoria, exhausted from pain and emotion, finally succumbed to sleep in a room at the widow Jensen's boarding house, Owen keeping faithful vigil at her bedside. It was there that Marshal Calloway found him the next morning. Thought you should know we found letters in Senior Porter's desk. Correspondence with the doctor who treated Edward Thornton before his death. Owen straightened, instantly alert, and confirmation of what Miss Thornton suspected. Her father was poisoned gradually over several weeks, made to look like heart failure. Calloway's expression was solemn. We've arrested the doctor as well. He's already confessing, trying to save his own skin. Owen glanced at Victoria, still sleeping peacefully. Will you tell her? She deserves to know the truth, Calloway replied, but perhaps it can wait until she's stronger. Owen nodded his agreement. Victoria had endured enough for now. The knowledge that her suspicions about her father's death were correct would bring both pain and vindication, but there would be time for that later. In the days that followed, Willow Creek underwent a transformation. With the porter's grip on the town broken, people began speaking openly about years of exploitation and fear. More evidence of the bankers' crimes emerged as former employees found the courage to come forward. The full extent of their fraud proved even greater than Victoria's father had documented. As Victoria recovered her strength, she and Owen discussed their future. The immediate danger had passed, but decisions remained. I could stay here, Victoria mused one afternoon as they sat in the boarding house garden. Reclaim my father's house, perhaps. There's a teaching position open at the school. Owen studied her carefully. Is that what you want? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. This town holds so many memories, good and bad. My parents lived here, loved here. My father died here. She turned to face Owen directly. But my future isn't here. I've known that since the day I fled. Where is your future then? Owen asked, though he thought he already knew the answer. Victoria smiled, reaching for his hand. With you, if you'll have me. On your ranch or somewhere new if you prefer. I just know I want us to be together. Owen brought her hand to his lips. I want that too, more than anything. Their decision made, they prepared for departure. Victoria's arm was healing well, though it would be some time before she regained full strength. Marshal Calloway had taken her formal statement and assured them they would be notified when the porters stood trial. But their presence was no longer required in Willow Creek. Before leaving, Victoria visited her parents' graves, placing fresh flowers and saying her final goodbyes. Owen stood respectfully at a distance, giving her the privacy she needed for this closure. "I told them about you," she said when she rejoined him. "About how you found me in your barn that night and changed my life." Owen smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I think my life changed more than yours." They departed Willow Creek on a bright September morning, riding side by side. Thunder seemed pleased to be on the trail again, and Victoria had been given a gentle mare from the town livery as a gift from the grateful citizens. "What will we name her?" Owen asked as they rode west toward home. Victoria patted the horse's neck affectionately. "Hope, I think. It seems fitting." Owen nodded his approval. "Hope it is." The journey back to Texas was easier than their flight from it had been. They traveled openly, without fear of pursuit, taking their time and enjoying each other's company. In towns along the way, they sometimes heard whispers of the Porter scandal, which had become something of a sensation in banking circles. When they finally crested the rise that overlooked Owen's ranch, both felt a sense of homecoming that transcended the physical structure waiting for them. Marcus had returned from his diversionary mission and had kept the place in good order during their absence. "Looks like everything's just as we left it," Owen observed as they rode down the slope toward the house. Victoria smiled, a contentment in her expression that had been absent when they first met. "Not everything. We're not the same people who left here." Owen returned her smile. "No, we're not. We're better." As they approached the house, the front door opened and Marcus stepped out, waving in welcome. Beside him stood Sheriff Wade Rogers, his broad face breaking into a grin at the sight of them. "About time you two showed up," Wade called. "Marcus here was starting to worry you'd decided to settle in Missouri after all." Owen dismounted, helping Victoria down from her horse. "No chance of that. This is home." Wade's eyes took in Victoria's bandaged arm. "Heard you had some excitement back east." "Federal marshals and embezzling bankers and all manner of drama." "News travels fast," Victoria observed. "Not as fast as telegrams from U.S. marshals asking about your character," Wade replied with a wink. "Seems you two made quite an impression on Marshal Calloway." They moved inside, where Marcus had prepared a welcome home meal. Over food and coffee, Owen and Victoria recounted their adventures, though they downplayed the more dangerous aspects when they noticed Marcus's growing concern. "Well, you're home now," the old trainer said firmly when they had finished. "And from what you say, those Porter fellows won't be troubling anyone for a good long while." 20 years at least, according to Calloway's estimate, Owen confirmed. With more charges still being added as they uncover the full extent of the fraud. Wade shook his head in wonder. "Hard to believe all that started with finding a young lady hiding in your barn." Owen's hand found Victoria's under the table. "Best thing that ever happened to me." Later, as the sun set over the Texas plains, Owen and Victoria stood on the porch, arms around each other as they watched the changing colors of the sky. "I want to start planning the wedding," Victoria said suddenly. "I don't see any reason to wait." Owen looked down at her with a raised eyebrow. "Miss Thornton, is that a proposal?" Victoria laughed, the sound light and free. "I suppose it is, Mr. Newcomb. What do you say?" Owen turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I say yes, 1,000 times yes, but allow me to do this properly." He lowered himself to one knee, still holding her hands. "Victoria Thornton, you are the bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Victoria's eyes shimmered with happy tears. "Yes, Owen, nothing would make me happier." He rose, pulling her into his arms and sealing their engagement with a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. They were married 2 months later in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Wade Rogers stood as Owen's best man, and to Victoria's surprise and delight, Marshal Calloway made the journey from St. Louis to give her away. Marcus decorated the barn with wildflowers and lanterns, transforming the humble structure where they had first met into a place of celebration and new beginnings. As they spoke their vows beneath an archway of autumn flowers, both thought of the strange twists of fate that had brought them together: a desperate flight, a chance encounter, a simple offer of help that had changed both their lives forever. The years that followed brought many blessings. The ranch prospered under their joint stewardship, with Victoria's keen mind for business complementing Owen's practical knowledge of the land. They expanded their holdings, adding more cattle and horses, including a special paddock for the Mustangs Owen had long admired on his uncle's property. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Victoria gave birth to a son, whom they named Edward Samuel Newcomb in honor of both their fathers. 2 years later, a daughter joined their family, Rose Maria, her middle name a tribute to Marcus, who had become like a grandfather to Edward. They received regular updates from Missouri, where the Porter case had set precedents in banking law that rippled throughout the nation's financial system. Victoria's father was posthumously recognized for his courage in documenting the fraud, and a portion of the recovered funds was set aside for a scholarship in his name at the local school. On cool evenings when the children were asleep and the day's work complete, Owen and Victoria often sat together on the porch, just as they had in those early days. Sometimes they spoke of their adventures, of the danger they had faced and overcome together. Other times they simply enjoyed the comfortable silence between them, the kind that only comes with deep and abiding love. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found me that night?" Victoria asked once, her head resting on Owen's shoulder as they watched a spectacular sunset paint the western sky. Owen considered the question seriously. "I try not to think about it. Some things are just meant to be, I reckon." Victoria smiled, thinking of the frightened young woman she had been, hiding in a stranger's barn, and the strong, confident wife and mother she had become. "You're right," she agreed. "Some things are just meant to be." As darkness settled over the ranch, Owen squeezed his wife's hand. "I'm grateful every day that you chose my barn to hide in, Victoria Newcomb." She turned her face up to his, love shining in her eyes. "And I'm grateful every day that you found me, Cowboy." Their lips met in a kiss as tender as their first, yet deepened by the years they had shared, and the life they had built together, a life that had begun with a simple act of kindness on a dark Texas night, when a cowboy found a woman hiding in his barn and said, "You're running from something. Let me help."